The blood-soaked letter in Vance Lawson's hand had arrived 5 years ago, and he had not opened his heart to another living soul since that day. He stood on the porch of his weathered ranch house outside Cimarron, New Mexico, watching storm clouds gather over the distant mountains, the wind carrying the scent of rain and sagebrush across the high desert plains. The year was 1882, and this isolated stretch of land suited him perfectly. No neighbors for miles, no one to ask questions, no one to remind him of the man he used to be before the war took everything that mattered. His cattle lowed in the distance, and his horse whinnied from the barn, but Vance barely registered the sounds. He had grown accustomed to the silence, had learned to find a strange comfort in the solitude that stretched endlessly around him. The ranch ran smoothly because he poured every waking moment into the work, driving himself until exhaustion claimed him each night, leaving no room for memories or regrets. The knock came so suddenly that Vance thought at first the wind had blown something against the door. He set down the saddle he had been mending and listened. Another knock, weaker this time, followed by a sound that made his chest tighten. A woman's voice, barely above a whisper, calling for help. He crossed the room in 3 long strides and pulled open the door to find a young woman collapsed against the frame, her dark hair matted with dirt and blood, her dress torn and dusty. She looked up at him with wide green eyes filled with terror and desperation, her whole body trembling like a wounded animal. "Please," she gasped, her voice breaking. "They are coming. They are going to kill me." Vance did not hesitate. He swept her into his arms, surprised by how light she felt, and carried her inside, kicking the door shut behind him. He laid her on the worn leather sofa near the fireplace and grabbed his rifle from above the mantel, moving to the window to scan the horizon. The storm was rolling in faster now, dark clouds swallowing the last traces of afternoon sunlight. "Who is coming?" he asked, his voice rough from disuse. He had not spoken to another person in weeks. "The Garner brothers," she whispered, and Vance felt ice settle in his stomach. He knew those names. Everyone in the territory knew the Garner brothers, Cole, Silas, and Marcus, outlaws who robbed stages, rustled cattle, and left bodies in their wake. The law had been chasing them for months, but they always managed to slip away into the backcountry. "Why are they after you?" The woman tried to sit up but winced, pressing a hand to her ribs. "I saw them. In Silver City 2 days ago. They robbed the bank and shot the clerk. I was coming out of the general store when it happened. Marcus saw me watching. He said they could not leave witnesses." Her eyes filled with tears. "I have been running ever since. My horse gave out 5 miles back. I saw your ranch and—" Her voice trailed off as she began to shake harder, shock setting in. Vance grabbed a blanket from the chair and wrapped it around her shoulders, then moved to bolt the door and check the windows. His ranch house was solidly built, with thick adobe walls and heavy shutters. It would hold against anything short of a siege, but the Garner brothers were known for their patience when it came to settling scores. "What is your name?" he asked, returning to her side. "Gabriella," she said softly. "Gabriella Anderson. I am Vance Lawson. You are safe here, Gabriella. I will not let them take you." She searched his face, and something in his expression must have convinced her because she nodded and pulled the blanket tighter around herself. "Thank you. I did not know where else to go. The nearest town is Cimarron, but I would never have made it on foot." "How long ago did you last see them?" "This morning. I thought I had lost them in the canyon country, but I heard horses about an hour before I found your ranch. They might not know I came here. They might ride past." Vance doubted it. Men like the Garner brothers did not give up easily, and if they had tracked Gabriella this far, they would search every structure for miles. He moved through the house, closing shutters and checking his ammunition. He had a rifle, a shotgun, and his Colt revolver, plus enough cartridges to hold off a small army if necessary. The question was whether it would come to that. The storm broke as darkness fell, rain hammering against the roof and lightning illuminating the landscape in brief, brilliant flashes. Vance lit a single lamp and kept it low, not wanting to advertise their presence. Gabriella had fallen into an exhausted sleep on the sofa, her face pale in the dim light. He found himself studying her features, the curve of her cheekbone, the dark lashes resting against her skin, the way her lips parted slightly as she breathed. She looked young, perhaps 22 or 23, with the kind of beauty that would draw attention anywhere she went. He turned away, angry at himself for noticing. He had no business thinking about her appearance or anything else. She was someone who needed help, nothing more. Once the danger passed, she would move on, and he would return to the life he had carefully constructed, a life without complications or connections. But as he maintained his vigil by the window, watching for any sign of riders through the storm, Vance could not quite shake the memory of how her hand had felt when it briefly touched his arm as he carried her inside, or the way her voice had broken when she said please. The night crawled by without incident. The storm continued its assault, and Vance found his thoughts drifting to places he had kept locked away for years. He thought about the letter, still tucked in the drawer of his desk, the one that informed him his wife Sarah and their infant daughter had died of fever while he was away fighting. He thought about how he had arrived home 2 weeks too late for the funeral, how the house had been empty and cold, how he had stood in the nursery staring at the cradle he had built with his own hands. After that, he had sold everything and drifted west, trying to outrun the grief. He had worked cattle drives, hired his gun out to ranchers fighting range wars, done whatever it took to keep moving, keep busy, keep from feeling. Eventually, he had saved enough to buy this ranch, and for the past 2 years, he had lived here alone, speaking to no one except when he sold cattle or bought supplies in town. A soft sound pulled him from his memories. Gabriella had woken and was sitting up, wincing as she moved. "Are you hurt?" Vance asked, moving toward her. "My ribs," she admitted. "I fell from my horse yesterday when I was trying to escape. I think they might be bruised, maybe cracked. Let me look." She hesitated, then nodded, pulling aside the blanket. Vance lit another lamp and carefully lifted the torn fabric of her dress away from her side. Dark purple bruises spread across her ribcage, and she gasped when he gently pressed the area. "Nothing broken," he said after a moment. "But you need to rest. No sudden movements for a few days." "I cannot stay here that long," Gabriella protested. "I am putting you in danger." "The danger was here the moment they started tracking you. Whether you stay or go makes no difference now. If they come, we will deal with them. You speak as if you are not afraid." Vance met her eyes, and for a moment, he considered telling her the truth, that he had stopped being afraid of death the day he lost his family, that in some ways he welcomed the possibility of it. But something in her expression stopped him. She needed reassurance, not the dark thoughts of a broken man. "I have dealt with worse than the Garner brothers," he said simply, which was true enough. The war had taught him things about violence and survival that most people never learned. Gabriella studied him for a long moment. "You live out here all alone. I prefer it that way." "That sounds lonely." "Loneliness is a choice," Vance said, turning back to the window. "I chose this." "Why?" The question hung in the air between them. Vance did not answer for a long time, watching the rain streak down the glass. Finally, he said, "Because it is easier than the alternative." He felt rather than saw her reaction, sensed her understanding that there was a story there, one he had no intention of sharing. To her credit, she did not press him. "I grew up in Missouri," Gabriella said quietly. My parents had a farm outside of Springfield. They both died of cholera when I was 17. I had an aunt in Silver City, so I came west to live with her. That was 4 years ago. She passed last winter, and I have been working at the boarding house, saving money to maybe buy a small place of my own someday. No husband, no beau, Gabriella shook her head. There was someone once back in Missouri, but he married someone else while I was traveling west. I received the letter a month after I arrived. After that, I decided it was better to focus on taking care of myself. Vance recognized the note of hurt beneath her matter-of-fact tone, the way she tried to make it sound like it did not matter when clearly it had. He understood that impulse, the need to pretend the past did not still have claws in you. The dawn brought a break in the storm and something worse, the sound of horses approaching. Vance was at the window in an instant, his rifle ready. 3 riders emerged from the morning mist, spread out in a line as they approached the house. Even at a distance, he could see the hard set of their shoulders, the way their hands rested near their weapons. "Stay down," he ordered Gabriella, who had gone pale at the sound of hoofbeats. The riders stopped 50 yards from the house. The one in the middle, a tall man with a dark beard, called out, "We know she is in there, mister. Send her out and we will leave you in peace." "No one here but me," Vance called back through the closed shutter. The bearded man laughed, the sound carrying clearly in the still morning air. "We tracked her footprints right to your door. Now I am going to give you one more chance. Send out the woman and you can go back to whatever you were doing. Make us come in there and it will not go well for you." Vance checked his ammunition again. "You boys best ride on. This does not concern you anymore. Is that right?" A second rider, younger and meaner looking, spurred his horse forward a few steps. "You know who we are, I know, the Garner brothers. Cole, Silas, and Marcus, if I had to guess. There are wanted posters for you all over the territory. $200 apiece, dead or alive." The bearded man Cole apparently spit in the dirt. "Then you know we do not make idle threats. Last chance." "Come and try," Vance said quietly. For a moment no one moved. Then all 3 men went for their guns. Vance fired through the shutter, his bullet catching the younger one in the shoulder and spinning him out of the saddle. The other 2 scattered, seeking cover behind rocks and scrub brush as they returned fire. Bullets slammed into the adobe walls and splintered the wooden shutters, but the house held. Gabriella crouched behind the sofa, her hands pressed over her ears, eyes wide with fear. Vance moved methodically from window to window, tracking the movements of the remaining 2 brothers. One was circling toward the barn, probably hoping to set it on fire and draw Vance outside. The other was working his way closer to the house, using the terrain for cover. Vance took his time, waiting for clear shots. When the one near the barn broke cover to make his run, Vance dropped him with a single round through the chest. The man fell without a sound, his body crumpling in the mud. That left Cole, who had stopped moving, probably reassessing his options now that 2 of his brothers were down. The wounded one was crawling toward the horses, leaving a trail of blood behind him. "Cole Garner," Vance called out, "your brothers are dead or dying. Ride away now and I will let you live." Silence stretched out. Then Cole's voice came from behind a boulder near the house. "You killed my family. I cannot let that stand. They tried to kill an innocent woman. They made their choice. She is a witness. She could hang us all. You were already wanted men. What difference does one more crime make?" Another long silence. Vance could hear Gabriella breathing behind him, quick and shallow. He risked a glance back and saw that she had tears streaming down her face but was holding herself together, not giving in to panic. Then Cole made his move, charging the front door with his gun blazing. Vance was ready. He fired twice, both shots finding their mark. Cole crashed through the doorframe and collapsed on the threshold, his gun clattering across the floor. Vance kicked it away and checked for a pulse. Nothing. He moved to secure the wounded brother, who was still trying to reach the horses. By the time Vance reached him, the man had lost too much blood. He died while Vance was binding his wound, his eyes going glassy as he stared up at the clearing sky. It was over in less than 10 minutes, but it felt like hours had passed. Vance stood in the muddy yard, looking at the 3 bodies, feeling nothing. He had killed men before, during the war and after, and each time it left him hollower than before. Not guilty. Exactly, these men had given him no choice but emptier, as if another piece of his humanity had been chipped away. He became aware of Gabriella standing in the doorway, still wrapped in the blanket, staring at the scene with horrified eyes. "Are you hurt?" she asked, her voice barely audible. Vance looked down and realized he had blood on his shirt, though he could not tell if it was his or belonged to Cole Garner. "I am fine. You saved my life. I did what needed doing." She walked toward him carefully, picking her way around the puddles and the bodies. When she reached him, she did something he did not expect. She wrapped her arms around him and pressed her face against his chest, sobbing. Vance stood frozen, unsure what to do. He had not held anyone in 5 years, had not felt another person's warmth or heard them cry against him. Every instinct told him to pull away, to maintain the distance he had worked so hard to build. But something stronger than instinct made him slowly raise his arms and fold them around her trembling form. She felt real in a way nothing had felt real for a long time. The weight of her, the sound of her breathing, the way her fingers clutched at his shirt, all of it pierced through the numbness he had wrapped around himself like armor. "I thought they would kill you," she whispered. "I thought I would watch you die because of me. I am not that easy to kill." She pulled back enough to look up at him, and he was struck again by how green her eyes were, like new grass after rain. "Thank you, Vance. I do not know how to repay you." "There is nothing to repay. You needed help and I gave it." But even as he said the words, he knew something had shifted. The moment he opened that door yesterday, the moment he carried her inside, something had changed. He could feel it in the way his chest tightened when she said his name, in the reluctance he felt to let her go. They spent the rest of that day dealing with the aftermath. Vance dragged the bodies into his barn temporarily, planning to take them into Cimarron the next day to collect the reward money and report what happened to the marshal. The law would need to know that the Garner brothers were no longer a threat. Gabriella insisted on helping despite her injured ribs, cleaning the blood from the doorway and gathering the scattered weapons. They worked in silence mostly, but it was a different kind of silence than the one Vance had grown accustomed to. This silence had weight and presence, charged with unspoken thoughts and stolen glances. That evening, as the sun set in shades of gold and crimson over the mountains, Vance made a simple meal of beans, bacon, and cornbread. They ate at his small wooden table, and Gabriella told him more about her life in Silver City, the other women who worked at the boarding house, the traveling merchants and cowboys who passed through, the quiet routines that made up her days. "It is not much of a life," she admitted, pushing beans around her plate. "But it is mine. I answer to no one, make my own choices. After growing up always being told what to do, that freedom matters." "I understand that," Vance said, and meant it. "You ever get lonely out here?" It was the second time she had asked him about loneliness, and this time Vance found himself giving a more honest answer. "Sometimes. Late at night mostly, when the work is done and there is nothing left to distract me. But I learned to live with it. It is better than the alternative." "What alternative?" He took a long breath, surprised to find he wanted to tell her. Maybe it was because she had seen him kill 3 men without hesitation. Maybe it was because she had her own losses and understood what it meant to survive them. Maybe it was simply because something about her made him want to be honest. "I had a wife," he said quietly. "Sarah. We married young, right before I joined up to fight in the war. I was 19, she was 18. When I came home on leave 2 years later, she was pregnant with our first child. I had 2 weeks with her, and then I had to go back." He paused, the words harder than he expected. "I never saw her again. She and our daughter both died of fever 8 months later. I got the letter a month after that, and by the time I made it home, they had been buried for weeks. I never even knew my daughter's name." Gabriella had stopped eating, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "Vance, I am so sorry. I sold everything and left. Spent 3 years drifting, trying to outrun it. Bought this place 2 years ago, figuring if I stayed busy enough and kept to myself, it would not hurt as much." He looked up at her. "It does not hurt less, but you learn to carry it." She reached across the table and took his hand, her fingers warm against his. "You should not have to carry it alone. Everyone carries their pain alone in the end. That does not mean they have to live alone. Pain shared is pain lessened, my mother used to say." Vance looked at their joined hands, trying to remember the last time someone had touched him with such simple kindness. "Your mother sounds like she was wise." "She was. I miss her every day, but I talk to her sometimes when I am alone. I tell her about my life, about the things I see. It helps, keeping her memory alive that way." "I do not talk to Sarah," Vance admitted. "I do not even visit her grave. I ran from it instead of facing it. It is not too late to face it. The dead do not judge us for how long it takes to grieve them properly." They sat together as darkness fell outside, still holding hands across the table. Vance knew he should pull away, should rebuild the walls she was somehow breaching without even trying, but he could not make himself do it. For the first time in 5 years, the loneliness felt like something he could escape rather than something he deserved. That night, he gave Gabriella his bedroom and made a bed for himself on the sofa. He lay awake for hours, listening to the sound of her moving around in the other room, the creak of the bed frame as she settled in. He thought about what she had said, about not having to live alone, and wondered if he had been wrong to choose this isolated existence. The next morning, they loaded the bodies onto a wagon and made the 10-mile journey into Cimarron. The town was larger than Vance remembered from his last visit months ago, with new buildings going up and more people on the streets. They drew stairs as they pulled up in front of the marshal's office, 3 dead outlaws visible under the canvas tarp in the wagon bed. Marshal Thomas Garrett was a weathered man in his 50s who had been keeping the peace in Cimarron for over a decade. He listened to their story with a grave expression, examining the bodies and making notes. "The Garner brothers," he said, shaking his head. "They have been terrorizing this territory for near about a year. There will be a lot of people sleeping easier knowing they are gone." He looked at Vance. "You did good work here, Lawson. That is $600 in reward money coming to you. Split it with Miss Anderson," Vance said. "She is the one they were hunting." Gabriella started to protest, but the marshal cut her off. "Fair enough. I will have the bank draft the money this afternoon. In the meantime, I will need to send telegrams to Santa Fe and Silver City. Let them know the case is closed." He turned to Gabriella. "You planning to go back to Silver City, miss?" She hesitated, glancing at Vance. "I do not know. I have not decided yet." "Well, if you do head back, you might want to wait a few days. Let the word spread that the Garner brothers are dead. Make sure there are not any associates looking for revenge." They left the marshal's office and walked down the main street, Vance very aware of how people looked at them, some curious, some approving, some speculating about the nature of their relationship. He had grown unused to being seen, and it made him uncomfortable. Gabriella stopped in front of the general store. "I need to buy some supplies, and a new dress if they have one ready-made. This one is ruined." "Take your time. I will get the wagon loaded with feed and other things I need." They split up, and Vance found himself feeling oddly adrift without her beside him. He had spent years cherishing his solitude, and now, after just 2 days, he was uncomfortable being away from a woman he barely knew. It made no sense, but there it was. He was loading sacks of grain into the wagon when someone called his name. He turned to find a woman approaching, middle-aged and dressed in the practical clothing of a ranch wife. "Vance Lawson. I thought that was you. Martha Henderson, do you remember me?" "My husband Carl bought some of your cattle last year." Vance nodded politely. "Yes, madam, I remember. How is your ranch doing?" "Well enough, thank you. Listen, I heard what happened with those outlaws. The whole town is talking about it, and I saw you come in with that young lady." She lowered her voice conspiratorially. "Is she your wife?" "No, madam, just someone who needed help." "Well, she is very pretty. If you are looking for a wife, you could do worse. It is not good for a man to live alone out there, not healthy." Vance managed not to react, though the assumption grated at him. "I appreciate your concern, Mrs. Henderson, but I am not looking for a wife." The woman gave him a knowing look. "Sometimes what we are looking for finds us anyway. You take care, Mr. Lawson." She walked away, leaving Vance unsettled. Was it so obvious that something had changed between him and Gabriella? Could other people see what he was only beginning to acknowledge to himself? He finished loading the wagon and went to find Gabriella. She was just emerging from the general store, wearing a new dress of dark blue calico that brought out the color of her eyes. She had also pinned up her hair, and the transformation was startling. She looked younger, more vibrant, like a different person than the terrified woman who had collapsed on his doorstep. "What do you think?" she asked, doing a small turn. "I know it is nothing fancy, but it fits and it is clean." "You look nice," Vance said, the words feeling inadequate. She looked beautiful, but he could not bring himself to say it. They collected their money from the bank, $300 each, and stopped at the hotel dining room for lunch. The meal was simple but good, and Vance found himself watching Gabriella as she ate, noting the way she savored each bite, the little sounds of satisfaction she made when tasting something particularly good. "This is wonderful," she said. "I have not had a proper meal in days." At the boarding house, we mostly ate leftovers from what we served the guests. "You could eat properly now," Vance said. "With your share of the reward money, you could buy supplies, maybe rent a better room somewhere." Gabriella set down her fork, her expression turning serious. "I suppose I could, or I could use it to make a fresh start somewhere else entirely." She met his eyes. "What would you do if you were me?" The question felt loaded with meaning. Vance chose his words carefully. "That depends on whether you have a reason to stay in Silver City or a reason to be somewhere else. I do not have family anywhere, no job I cannot replace, no ties keeping me in Silver City except habit and fear of change." She leaned forward slightly. "What I am trying to say is that I could stay anywhere, do anything. And right now, the only place I want to be is somewhere I feel safe, somewhere I feel like I matter to someone." Vance's heart was hammering in his chest. He knew what she was saying, knew what she was offering, and every instinct he had spent 5 years building told him to refuse, to push her away, to protect himself from the possibility of more loss. But he thought about how empty his house had felt this morning after she left his bedroom, how the silence that used to be tolerable now felt oppressive. He thought about her hand in his last night, about the way she had looked at him with trust and something more. "My ranch could use help," he said slowly. I have been meaning to hire someone to help with the cooking and cleaning, maybe tend a garden. The work is hard and the pay would not be much beyond room and board, but you would have your own space and your independence." Gabriella smiled, and it transformed her entire face. "I accept. When do I start?" "Today, if you are willing to ride back with me now, I am willing." They bought additional supplies, fabric for curtains, seeds for a garden, a few personal items for Gabriella, and loaded everything into the wagon. The ride back to the ranch felt different from the morning journey. There was a lightness to it, a sense of possibility that Vance had not felt in years. As they crested the last hill and his ranch came into view, he saw it through new eyes. The house suddenly seemed shabby, in need of repairs and a woman's touch. The yard was barren except for scrub brush. The whole place had the look of somewhere a person existed rather than lived. "It needs work," he admitted. "I have been focused on the cattle and let the rest go." "I can help with that," Gabriella said. "My parents taught me how to make a home out of very little. By the time fall comes, this place could look completely different." They spent the rest of the afternoon settling her in. Vance had a small room off the kitchen that he had been using for storage. They cleared it out, and he built a simple bed frame while Gabriella swept and scrubbed the floor. By evening, she had a space of her own, small but clean, with a window overlooking the eastern pastures. That night, they ate together again, and the conversation flowed more easily. Gabriella told him about her childhood in Missouri, about helping her father with the farm work and learning to ride before she could read. Vance found himself sharing stories from before the war, memories he had not touched in years, fishing with his father, building his first barn, meeting Sarah at a church social. "She sounds like she was wonderful," Gabriella said softly. She was. "Young and hopeful and full of dreams about the life we would build together. I failed her by not being there when she needed me most. You were at war. You had no choice. There are always choices. I chose to enlist instead of staying to work the farm. I chose duty over family. You chose to serve your country. That is not something to be ashamed of." Vance shook his head. "I have spent 5 years wondering if things would have been different if I had stayed. Maybe she would not have gotten sick. Maybe I could have gotten her to a doctor in time. Maybe my daughter would be alive." Gabriella reached across the table and took both his hands this time, holding them firmly. "Maybe, maybe, maybe. You can drive yourself mad with maybes, Vance. I did the same thing after my parents died. Maybe if I had been home instead of in town that day, I would have noticed they were sick sooner. Maybe I could have saved them. But the truth is, we do not control everything. Sometimes bad things happen and there is no one to blame. How do you live with it? By choosing to live. By honoring their memory with the life I build now. By not giving up, even when it would be easier to just stop trying." Her eyes were fierce now, blazing with conviction. "Your wife and daughter would not want you to spend the rest of your life alone and grieving. They would want you to be happy, to find joy again. I do not know if I remember how. Then learn again. Start small, notice the sunrise, taste your food, listen to the wind, feel alive instead of just existing." They sat in silence for a long moment, hands joined across the table. Vance could feel something breaking open inside him, some calcified shell he had built around his heart beginning to crack. "I am glad you knocked on my door," he said finally. Gabriella smiled. "So am I." The days that followed fell into a rhythm that surprised Vance with its comfort. He rose early to tend the cattle, and by the time he returned to the house, Gabriella had breakfast waiting, real breakfast, not the cold beans and stale bread he usually ate. They worked together in the morning, mending fences and clearing brush, then separated for afternoon tasks. Gabriella started a garden near the house, turning the hard, packed earth and planting seeds she had bought in town. Vance worked with his horses, training the young ones and checking the older animals for injury or illness. In the evenings, they cooked together, and these hours became Vance's favorite part of the day. There was something intimate about working side by side in the small kitchen, their hands occasionally brushing as they reached for the same utensil, their voices low and warm in the lamplight. They talked about everything and nothing. Gabriella told him about books she had read, dreams she had for the future. Vance found himself sharing things he had never told anyone, his fears during the war, the nightmares that still sometimes woke him, the guilt that had driven him into isolation. "Guilt is a strange thing," Gabriella said one night as they sat on the porch watching the stars. "It makes us punish ourselves for things that were not our fault. It convinces us we do not deserve happiness or peace." "How did you stop feeling guilty about your parents?" "I did not. Not entirely. But I learned to carry it differently. Instead of letting it crush me, I use it to remind me that life is precious and short. Every day I have is a gift they did not get to finish, so I try to live fully for all of us." Vance thought about that for a long time. "I have been existing instead of living, for 5 years now." "But you are not alone anymore. That is a start." She was right. For the first time since Sarah's death, Vance felt the stirrings of something beyond mere survival. He looked forward to each new day, curious about what Gabriella would say, what small improvements she would make to the ranch, what new recipes she would try. The house felt warmer, more alive. Even his animals seemed to sense the change, his horses nickering when they saw her coming, his dog, an old mutt he had found half-starved on the trail years ago, following her around like she hung the moon. 3 weeks after Gabriella arrived, a traveling preacher came through the area, stopping at the ranch to water his horse. He was an elderly man with kind eyes and a gentle manner, and he stayed for supper at Gabriella's invitation. Over the meal, he told them about the small communities he served, riding a circuit that covered hundreds of miles of territory. "It is hard work," he admitted, "but rewarding. I perform weddings and baptisms, preside over funerals, offer what comfort I can to people living hard lives in a hard land." After he left, Gabriella was quiet, standing on the porch with her arms wrapped around herself despite the warm evening. "What is wrong?" Vance asked. "Nothing. I was just thinking about what he said, about weddings and families, about people building lives together even in difficult circumstances." She turned to face him. "Do you ever think about trying again, about finding someone new?" Vance's mouth went dry. They had been dancing around this for weeks now, the attraction growing stronger with each passing day, but neither of them had acknowledged it directly. "I did not think I could. I thought I had used up my chance at that kind of happiness. What if you were wrong? What if you get more than one chance?" He moved closer to her, drawn by something stronger than his fear. "Gabriella, I need to be honest with you. I am not the same man I was before the war, before I lost Sarah. There are pieces of me that are broken, maybe permanently. I do not know if I am capable of being what someone would need. What if I do not need you to be anything except yourself? What if I already care about the man you are right now, broken pieces and all?" Vance reached up and touched her face, his calloused fingers gentle against her cheek. "You deserve someone whole, someone without so much darkness. Everyone has darkness, Vance. The question is whether you are willing to let someone help you carry it." He kissed her then, gently at first, giving her every chance to pull away. But she leaned into him instead, her arms coming up to circle his neck, her lips warm and soft against his. The kiss was tender and searching, full of questions and tentative answers. When they finally pulled apart, Vance was shaking. "I have not kissed anyone since Sarah." "I was not sure I remembered how." Gabriella smiled, her eyes bright in the starlight. You remember just fine. That night marked a turning point. They did not rush into anything. Both were too cautious, too aware of the weight of what was growing between them. But the walls Vance had built were crumbling, and he found himself opening up in ways he had not thought possible. They began taking evening walks together after dinner, strolling through the pastures as the sun set and the desert air cooled. Gabriella would point out wildflowers blooming in unlikely places, and Vance would show her his favorite spots on the ranch, the spring-fed pool where he watered his cattle, the rocky outcropping that offered a view of 3 mountain ranges, the old cottonwood tree that somehow survived in the harsh landscape. "This land is beautiful in its way," Gabriella said one evening as they sat beneath the cottonwood. "Harsh and unforgiving, but beautiful." "Like life itself," Vance said. "Exactly like life." She rested her head on his shoulder and he wrapped his arm around her, marveling at how natural it felt. "I need to tell you something," he said. "I have been thinking about what you said about not wasting the life we have been given, and I realized I have been wasting it, hiding out here, afraid to feel anything. You had good reasons to be afraid. Maybe. But fear is not a way to live. And these past few weeks with you, I have started to remember what it feels like to be alive instead of just going through the motions." Gabriella lifted her head to look at him. "What are you saying?" "I am saying I care about you, more than I thought I could care about anyone again. And it terrifies me because I do not know if I can survive losing someone else I love." "Love?" Vance took a deep breath. "Yes, love. I did not mean for it to happen. I tried to keep my distance, tried to maintain the walls, but you walked right through them like they were made of paper." He cupped her face in his hands. "I love you, Gabriella, and I know it is too soon, and I know I am a mess, but I need you to know." Tears spilled down her cheeks, but she was smiling. "I love you too, Vance. I think I started falling for you the moment you carried me inside and promised to protect me. You have been kind and patient and honest with me. You have shared your pain and let me share mine. How could I not love you?" They kissed again, deeper this time, and Vance felt something inside him that had been frozen for 5 years finally begin to thaw. It hurt, that thawing, a sharp, aching pain as feeling returned to places that had been numb. But it was a good pain, the kind that meant healing was possible. "I do not have much to offer you," he said when they finally broke apart. "This ranch, my name, my protection, but it is yours if you want it." "Are you asking me to marry you?" Vance realized that he was. "Yes. I know I should do this properly, should court you for months and ask your father's permission and all the rest. But I do not have a father to ask, and I do not want to wait. I have wasted 5 years already. I do not want to waste another day." Gabriella laughed, the sound full of joy. "Yes. Yes, I will marry you." They rode into Cimarron the next day to speak with the preacher, who was preparing to leave town. He listened to their story with a warm smile and agreed to perform the ceremony before he departed. "I have been marrying couples for 30 years, he said, "and I have learned to recognize the real thing when I see it. You too have it. Sometimes love is slow and gentle, built over years of companionship, and sometimes it strikes like lightning, fast and undeniable. Both kinds are valid. Both kinds can last." They were married that afternoon in the small church on the edge of town, with the preacher's wife and Marshal Garrett serving as witnesses. Gabriella wore her blue calico dress with a crown of wildflowers that Vance had picked that morning. He wore his best shirt and pants, his hair still damp from the hasty bath he had taken at the hotel. The ceremony was simple and brief, but every word felt like a vow written on Vance's heart. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Vance kissed his bride with a tenderness that made the elderly woman dab at her eyes with her handkerchief. They spent their wedding night at the hotel in Cimarron, in a room with lace curtains and a real feather mattress. Vance was nervous in a way he had not expected, but Gabriella was patient and loving, guiding him back to intimacy with gentle touches and whispered words. "I have not been with anyone since Sarah," he admitted as they lay together in the darkness afterward. "I know. And I have never been with anyone before tonight. We are both learning together." "I did not hurt you." "No," she kissed his shoulder. "You were wonderful, gentle and careful and present. I could not have asked for more." They talked late into the night, making plans for their future. Gabriella wanted to expand the garden, maybe get some chickens. Vance thought they could build a better barn next spring, add a few more head of cattle. They talked about children too, cautiously at first, both aware of the grief surrounding that subject. "I would like to have children someday," Gabriella said, "but only if you are ready. I know you lost your daughter, and I would never want to pressure you." Vance was quiet for a long time, thinking. "I was not ready before. The thought of having another child felt like betraying Sarah's memory. But now, with you, it feels different. Like maybe I could have a family again without dishonoring the one I lost. You could never dishonor their memory by choosing to live and love again. That is not how love works. How does love work? It multiplies. Having more love in your life does not diminish what came before. Your love for Sarah and your daughter will always be part of you. But there is room for new love too, for me and for any children we might have." Vance pulled her closer, overwhelmed by the wisdom of this woman who had appeared on his doorstep less than 2 months ago. "How did you get so wise? Suffering teaches wisdom if you let it. And I decided a long time ago to let my pain make me stronger and kinder instead of bitter and hard." They returned to the ranch the next morning, and life settled into a new rhythm. Now they shared the larger bedroom, and Gabriella transformed it with small touches: curtains she sewed from fabric bought in town, a quilt she pieced together from scraps, wildflowers in a jar on the windowsill. The house began to feel like a home. Summer blazed across the high desert, bringing temperatures that shimmered over the land in visible waves. Gabriella's garden thrived despite the heat, producing tomatoes and beans and squash. She canned what they could not eat, building up stores for the winter. Vance taught her to ride better, and soon she was helping him move cattle from one pasture to another, working side by side in the saddle. They made love frequently, learning each other's bodies and preferences, growing more comfortable with intimacy. Sometimes it was passionate and urgent, but often it was slow and tender, a physical expression of the emotional connection deepening between them. One evening in late August, as they sat on the porch after supper, Gabriella said, "I think I might be pregnant." Vance felt his heart stop and then start again, racing. "Are you sure?" "Not completely. But I have missed my monthly courses and I have been feeling sick in the mornings. It could be something else, but I think this is it." A wave of emotions crashed over Vance's joy and terror in equal measure. "How do you feel about it?" "Scared, excited, hopeful, all at once." She took his hand. "How do you feel?" Vance had to think about that. 5 years ago, the news would have devastated him, would have sent him running. But now, looking at Gabriella's anxious face in the fading light, he felt something different: a tentative, fragile joy. "I am scared too," he admitted, "but I am happy. If we are having a child, I will do everything in my power to be there for both of you, to keep you safe. To be the husband and father I should have been before. You were not given the chance to be that before. The war took it from you, but you have the chance now." They held each other as the stars came out, talking about the future in concrete terms for the first time. They would need to add a room to the house for a nursery, buy a cradle and baby clothes, find a midwife willing to ride out to the ranch when the time came, make plans for how to manage the ranch work when Gabriella was too pregnant to help. The next few months passed in a blur of preparation and anticipation. Gabriella's pregnancy progressed normally, and as her belly grew round with their child, Vance found himself marveling at the miracle of it. He would rest his hand on her stomach and feel their baby kick, overwhelmed by the fierce protectiveness that surged through him. He also found himself talking to Sarah again, late at night when Gabriella was asleep. "I hope you understand," he whispered into the darkness. "I will always love you and our daughter, but I am alive and I need to live. I hope you would want that for me." He had no idea if Sarah could hear him or what she would think, but saying the words helped ease the last lingering guilt he carried. Winter came to the high desert, bringing cold nights and occasional snow. Vance worked harder than ever to prepare, cutting extra firewood and storing feed for the cattle. Gabriella spent more time inside as her pregnancy advanced, sewing baby clothes and knitting blankets, preparing for their child's arrival. The baby came on a cold night in February 1883, arriving in a rush after a labor that lasted 12 hours. Vance assisted the midwife, holding Gabriella's hand and offering what comfort he could as she worked to bring their child into the world. When he finally heard the baby's first cry, he wept openly, 5 years of grief and guilt releasing in a single moment. "It is a boy," the midwife announced, placing the squirming, red-faced infant on Gabriella's chest. "A healthy, strong boy." Vance looked at his son, and felt his heart crack open completely. The baby had dark hair and already showed signs of having his mother's eyes. He was perfect and terrifying and more beautiful than anything Vance had ever seen. "What should we name him?" Gabriella asked, exhausted but radiant. Vance thought for a moment. "What about Samuel? It was my father's name. Samuel Lawson, I like it." She looked up at him with tired eyes. "We made a person, Vance. We made a whole new person." "We did." He kissed her forehead, then his son's downy head. "Thank you for giving me this, for giving me everything. You gave me everything too. You saved my life, and then you gave me a reason to live it fully." The first months of fatherhood were harder than Vance expected. Samuel was a fussy baby, colicky and prone to crying fits that lasted hours. Vance walked the floor with him countless nights, pacing back and forth while Gabriella tried to catch a few hours of sleep. He learned to change diapers, to warm bottles, to decode the different types of cries that meant hunger versus discomfort versus just wanting to be held. There were moments when the lack of sleep and the constant demands overwhelmed him, when he doubted his ability to be a good father. But Gabriella was patient, reminding him that all new parents struggled, that it was normal to feel inadequate sometimes. "You are doing wonderfully," she told him one night after he finally got Samuel to sleep. "He trusts you. Look at how peaceful he is in your arms." Vance looked down at his sleeping son, at the tiny face relaxed in slumber, and felt a surge of love so intense it almost hurt. "I cannot believe he is ours. Sometimes I look at him and expect to wake up to find out this was all a dream. It is not a dream. This is real. Our life together is real." As Samuel grew from infant to toddler, the ranch prospered. Word had spread about Vance killing the Garner brothers, and his reputation brought him offers to buy his cattle at premium prices. He expanded his herd and hired a couple of ranch hands to help with the work, men who had been down on their luck and appreciated steady employment and fair treatment. Gabriella became known in the area as someone with a healing touch, learning herbal remedies from an elderly Hispanic woman who lived nearby. She helped deliver babies for families who could not afford a doctor, stitched up wounds, and provided medicines for common ailments. She refused payment, accepting only what people could afford to give, sometimes money, sometimes food, sometimes just gratitude. "You are turning into a folk hero," Vance teased her one evening after she returned from helping a neighbor's difficult childbirth. "Hardly." I am just doing what anyone would do. Not anyone. You have a gift for healing, for making people feel cared for. It is one of the things I love most about you. Their life was not without challenges. The ranch work was grueling, and there were lean years when the weather did not cooperate. Samuel went through a period of childhood illness that terrified them both, though he eventually recovered. Vance's nightmares from the war still plagued him occasionally, and there were nights when Gabriella had to talk him down from dark places. But through it all, they had each other. The love that had struck them so suddenly, that first day continued to grow and deepen, maturing from passionate infatuation into something solid and enduring. They learned to fight fairly, to communicate their needs, to forgive each other's mistakes and move forward together. When Samuel was 3 years old, Gabriella became pregnant again. This time, Vance was not as terrified. He knew what to expect and felt more confident in his ability to be a father. Their daughter was born in the spring of 1886, an easier birth than Samuel's had been. They named her Rose, after Gabriella's mother. She had her mother's green eyes and her father's serious expression, and from the moment she entered the world, she had both her parents wrapped around her tiny finger. Watching Samuel meet his baby sister for the first time, Vance felt a completeness he had never imagined possible. His family had grown beyond his wildest dreams. He thought of Sarah and the daughter he had never met, and instead of the sharp pain he used to feel, there was a gentle ache, a bittersweet remembrance. "I wish they could have met these children," he told Gabriella one night as they watched their baby sleep. "Maybe they can in their way. If there is anything beyond this life, I like to think our loved ones can see us and know we are happy. Do you think I have done right by their memory? By building a new life? I think you have done exactly what you needed to do to survive and eventually thrive. There is no wrong way to heal from loss, as long as you do not give up on living." The years rolled on, marked by small joys and occasional sorrows. They added more rooms to the house as their family grew. Vance built a proper barn and bought more land. Gabriella's garden expanded until it was large enough to supply vegetables to several families in the area. Samuel grew into a serious, thoughtful boy who loved working with the horses. Rose was wild and fearless, always getting into mischief. When Samuel was 10 and Rose was 7, Gabriella told Vance she was pregnant again. This time the baby came quickly, barely giving them time to summon the midwife. Vance delivered his third child himself, a boy they named Daniel. 3 children, Gabriella said wonderingly, holding the newborn. "When I knocked on your door all those years ago, I never imagined any of this. I am glad you knocked. I am glad you ran to my house instead of somewhere else. I am glad for every choice that led us here. Even the Garner brothers," Vance considered that. "Even them, as strange as that sounds. If they had not been chasing you, you would never have found me. Something terrible brought us together, but we made something beautiful from it." On their 10th wedding anniversary, Vance took Gabriella on a trip to Santa Fe. It was the first time they had left the ranch for more than a day or two, leaving the children in the care of their hired hands and neighbors. They stayed in a real hotel, ate in restaurants, and walked through the streets like newlyweds. "Thank you for this," Gabriella said as they strolled through the plaza in the evening light, "for taking the time to do this with me. I should have done it years ago. You deserve to be courted and romanced, not just be a ranch wife and mother. I am happy being a ranch wife and mother. But this is wonderful too." She squeezed his hand. "I love our life, Vance. I love you. I would not change anything. Not even the hard parts, especially not the hard parts. They made us who we are. They taught us what matters." They made love that night in their hotel room, taking their time in a way they rarely could at home with 3 children. Afterward, Lying tangled together in the sheets, Vance told her about his plans to expand the ranch even further, maybe start breeding horses seriously instead of just raising cattle. "I want to build something that lasts," he said. "Something to pass on to our children and their children. A legacy." "You already have that. Our family is your legacy. Everything else is just details." "You are right. You are always right," she laughed. "I am not always right, but I am right about this." They returned home to find their children had missed them terribly. Samuel had tried to be the man of the house and taken his responsibilities seriously. Rose had been a whirlwind of activity, driving everyone crazy with her energy. Baby Daniel had cried for his mother every night. "I think 10 years is long enough to wait before the next trip," Vance joked as he held his youngest son. "Agreed. Next time we go somewhere, we are bringing them with us." But life on the ranch was demanding and trips remained rare. The days blended into seasons and the seasons into years. They celebrated birthdays and holidays, weathered storms and droughts, mourned the deaths of older friends and celebrated the births of neighbors' children. Vance never completely stopped missing Sarah and his first daughter, but the pain had transformed into something gentler, a quiet sadness that only occasionally surfaced. He had learned to carry it alongside his happiness, understanding that both could exist in the same heart. On a summer evening in 1895, 13 years after their wedding, Vance sat on the porch with Gabriella, watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and purple. Their 3 children were playing in the yard. Samuel, nearly a man now at 16, teaching Rose how to throw a rope properly, while 13-year-old Daniel climbed the cottonwood tree. "You ever regret it?" Gabriella asked. "Taking me in that night? Your life would have been simpler without me." Vance pulled her close, kissing the top of her head. "Simpler, maybe, but empty. Before you, I was not really living. I was just waiting to die. You gave me a reason to wake up each morning, to care about the future. You gave me a family and a home and love I thought I would never have again. You gave me all of that too. When I knocked on your door, I was running for my life, terrified and alone. You could have turned me away, but you chose to protect me, to care for me, to love me. I could not have done anything else. From the moment I saw you, something inside me woke up. Something I thought had died with Sarah. What do you think she would say if she could see you now?" Vance thought about that, watching his children play. "I think she would say I did what I had to do, that I survived and found a way to be happy again. I think she would approve of you, would love you for taking care of me and giving me these beautiful children." "I like to think so too." They sat in comfortable silence as the light faded and stars began appearing in the darkening sky. Samuel called his siblings in for supper, and they all trooped into the house, filling it with noise and laughter. Later that night, after the children were in bed, Vance and Gabriella lay together in the darkness, comfortable in the familiar warmth of each other. "Thank you," Vance said softly. "For what?" "For knocking on my door, for being brave enough to run to a stranger's house, for giving me a second chance at happiness, for loving me even when I was broken. Thank you for opening the door, for protecting me, for letting me in, even though it must have been terrifying to risk your heart again." "It was, but you were worth the risk. You are worth everything." They kissed, a slow, deep kiss full of years of shared history and promises kept. Then they settled into sleep, wrapped around each other as they had been for 13 years. 2 people who had found each other in the midst of violence and fear and built something beautiful from the ashes of their former lives. The years continued to pass with that particular speed that comes in middle age. Samuel left home at 18 to work on a larger ranch in Colorado, learning the business before returning to eventually take over his father's spread. Rose fell in love with a teacher who came to the area, marrying him in a ceremony at the ranch when she was 19. Daniel showed a talent for working with horses and began breeding them seriously, turning that part of the ranch into a profitable business. Vance's hair went gray at the temples, and lines appeared around his eyes from squinting into the sun for decades. Gabriella's face showed the passage of time too, but to Vance, she remained as beautiful as the day she knocked on his door. More beautiful, actually, because now he knew the depth of her character, the strength of her spirit, the endless capacity of her heart. They became grandparents when Rose had her first child, a boy named Thomas. Holding his grandson for the first time, Vance was transported back to the night Samuel was born, to that moment when he had thought his heart might burst from the overwhelming love he felt. It was the same now, perhaps even more intense for the prospective age had given him. "I never thought I would have this," he told Gabriella as they rocked the baby together on their porch. "A wife, children, grandchildren, a real family. After Sarah died, I thought that part of my life was over. But it was not over. It was just beginning in a different way. Because you knocked on my door." Gabriella smiled, that same smile that had captivated him all those years ago. "Because you opened it. A lot of men would not have. A lot of men would have been too afraid or suspicious or selfish. But you opened the door and you let me in, and you saved my life in more ways than one. We saved each other. Yes, I think we did." On their 25th wedding anniversary in 1907, their children organized a celebration at the ranch. Friends and neighbors came from miles around, filling the house and yard with laughter and music. There was dancing and food and storytelling, people sharing memories of the years that had passed. Marshall Garrett, now retired but still spry, made a toast. "I remember when Vance brought those Garner brothers into town with a pretty young woman at his side. I thought then there was something special between them, something that might last. 25 years later, I am glad to see I was right." To Vance and Gabriella, may they have another 25 years together. Everyone raised their glasses, and Vance looked around at the gathering, his children and grandchildren, his friends, his neighbors, and felt a contentment so complete it brought tears to his eyes. "What is wrong?" Gabriella asked, noticing his expression. "Nothing. Everything is right, more right than I ever imagined it could be." He pulled her into his arms and kissed her, not caring that everyone was watching. "I love you, Gabriella Lawson. I will love you until my last breath and beyond." "I love you too, Vance. Thank you for being brave enough to love again. Thank you for building this life with me." They danced together as the sun set, moving slowly to music played by neighbors on fiddle and guitar, surrounded by the people they loved and the life they had built from the ashes of tragedy and loss. As the years moved into the 1910s, Vance began to slow down, his body finally showing the toll of decades of hard work. But his mind remained sharp, and his love for Gabriella never wavered. They spent long evenings together, talking about the past and watching their family grow. Samuel had taken over most of the ranch operations, running it with the same dedication his father had shown. He had married a strong woman from a neighboring ranch, and they had 3 children of their own. Rose and her husband had moved to Cimarron, where he taught school, and she ran a small library. Daniel had become one of the most respected horse breeders in the territory, sought after for his expertise and his integrity. "We did well," Vance told Gabriella one evening as they sat together, his arm around her shoulders. "Our children are good people, kind and honest and hardworking. That is a legacy worth leaving." "It is. And it is all because of you, because you chose to love again instead of staying frozen in your grief. Because you gave me a reason to love again." They had this conversation often now, circling back to that first night, to the moment that had changed everything. It had become their origin story, the foundation on which their entire life together was built. "You remember what you said the first time I kissed you?" Gabriella asked. "I said I had not kissed anyone since Sarah, that I was not sure I remembered how. And I said you remembered just fine." "You were right about that too." She laughed, the sound still as clear and joyful as it had been when she was young. "We have had a good life, Vance, better than I ever dreamed possible, the best life, and it is not over yet. We still have time." And they did. Another decade passed, bringing changes and challenges, but also joys and triumphs. They celebrated their children's successes and supported them through their struggles. They welcomed more grandchildren and even a few great-grandchildren. They grew old together, their bodies slowing but their love remaining strong. On a spring morning in 1925, 43 years after that fateful knock on the door, Vance woke to find Gabriella still sleeping beside him. He watched her breathe, studying the face he knew better than his own, and felt grateful for every day they had been given. She stirred and opened her eyes, smiling when she saw him watching her. "Good morning. Good morning. I was just thinking about how lucky I am. We are both lucky. We found each other when we needed each other most. And we never let go. Never." They rose slowly, helping each other dress, and made their way to the kitchen. Samuel and his wife were already there, preparing breakfast for everyone. The ranch was busy now, full of family and hired hands, never quiet or lonely. After breakfast, Vance and Gabriella walked out to their favorite spot under the cottonwood tree. It had grown larger over the years, its branches spreading wide to provide shade. They sat together, holding hands, watching the morning light spread across the land Vance had made his own so long ago. "You ever think about how different things could have been?" Gabriella asked. "If the Garner brothers had not chased me, if I had knocked on someone else's door, if you had turned me away, sometimes. But I try not to dwell on it. We made the choices we made and they led us here. That is what matters. I am glad I knocked on your door. I am glad I opened it." They sat in comfortable silence, two old people who had loved each other well and built a life that would outlast them both. Their story would be told by their children and grandchildren, the tale of how a trembling woman knocked on a cowboy's door and changed everything. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, Vance thought about all the years that had passed since that stormy night when Gabriella had appeared on his threshold. He thought about the man he had been then closed off, grieving, convinced he would live and die alone. He thought about the journey they had taken together, the love they had shared, the family they had raised. "Thank you," he said again, as he had said so many times over the years. Gabriella squeezed his hand. "For what?" "For everything. For being brave, for loving me. For giving me a second chance at life. You gave me the same thing. We were both broken in our own ways, both running from our pasts, but we found each other and we healed together. Best thing I ever did was open that door. Best thing I ever did was knock on it." They sat together until the heat of the day drove them back inside, where their family waited. Their story was not about dramatic rescues or grand gestures, though it had started with both. It was about two damaged people who chose to trust each other, to build something new from the wreckage of their former lives. It was about opening doors and knocking on them, about taking chances and choosing love over fear. And it was about understanding that healing does not mean forgetting, that you can honor the past while embracing the future, that the heart has an infinite capacity for love if you are brave enough to use it. Vance Lawson had not let anyone close in 5 years when that trembling woman knocked on his door. But he had made the choice to let her in, and that choice had saved them both. Together, they had built a life of meaning and purpose, of love and family, of joy earned through hardship and grief transformed into hope. Their story became legend in the territory, told and retold over the years, the cowboy who had closed his heart and the woman who opened it again. Two souls who found each other in the wilderness and created something beautiful that would last for generations. And at the heart of it all was a simple truth. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is open the door when someone knocks, and sometimes the bravest thing you can do is knock on the door when you need help. They had both been brave that night, and their bravery had been rewarded with a lifetime of love.